Hello, everyone, and I want to thank you for joining us today on this very special segment of Represent NYC. I am Assemblywoman Inez E. Dickens, representing the 70th Assembly District in Manhattan, and I'm happy to be joined by the fantastic group of panelists that we have joining us to discuss this very important topic, voting. Dr. Howard Dodson Jr., retired as Director of New York Public Library's Schomburg Center for Research for Black Culture. Leilani Irvin, who is a lifelong resident of Harlem and is a proud graduate of her HBCU Benedict College, located in Columbia, South Carolina, and a longtime friend, Cynthia Doty, Deputy Chief Clerk, Board of Elections, and she has been for years, she was the Democratic District Leader in the 69th Assembly District. As most of our viewers are aware, yesterday morning we lost New York City's former First Lady, Joyce Dickens, the bride of the Honorable Mayor David Dickens, who passed away due to a long-time illness that she had yesterday. And the mayor, David Dickens, is heartbroken at the loss of, as he referred to her, his bride. He continued to call her his bride, and he would have been with us, but he is just devastated, as we can imagine. The arrangements are being made today, so we don't have any, but I just wanted to take that moment to offer up our prayers and our condolences to Mayor Dickens and the Dickens family. They have two children, David Jr. and Donna, to say that, you know, the entire city shares in your loss and your grief at the loss of a phenomenal woman. It's good that we're having this segment today on voting, because this is something that in our culture that we have not embraced fully. And so, but I want to first ask Cynthia, would she please, I just have a few things I'd like to ask you just to get started in the segue, because Dr. Dodson is going to give us the history, and Leilani is going to tell us why young people have not voted. And maybe we can get some dialogue. But Cynthia, I thought that you could start out by telling us just one or two things, like the current political climate has affected the overall opinion of most voters. How has that opinion changed in the last few years as it comes to voting?
Well, I think this year there is a tremendous interest in voting, but people are nervous about our new absentee voting. We didn't have much absentee voting a few years ago, but over the last, because of COVID, we've increased our the ability for absentee voting, and people are nervous. They're nervous about will the ballots be counted? Will the post office deliver the mail? But we do have a lot of people registered to vote. I think in Manhattan alone, we have over 1 million voters registered in all the various parties. And just over last week, we had, on Thursday, I think we had about 900 people come in just to register to vote. So there is an enthusiasm about voting, but I think people are wary. They want to be sure that their vote is counted, and they have lots of questions about it. One of the things that we have been offering this year is that there are now 3 different ways that you can vote. You can vote on Election Day, the way we have traditionally. Polls are open from 6 to 9. But then you can also vote early voting. And that was started last year, but I think this year is going to be very, very popular. There are 9 days of early voting. people are assigned to a specific early voting site, but when they go there, it probably will not have long lines, and it should be a simpler way to vote. And then, of course, by, as I said earlier, by absentee ballot. You can apply for an absentee ballot. And this year, the reason is, you can say, for fear of COVID or fear of catching COVID. And so in June, we had a couple 100,000 people apply for absentee ballots. I think already we are up to about 400,000 people applying for absentee ballots just in Manhattan alone. So those are the three different ways that you can vote. And I think there's a determination on the part of voters to get out and actually vote.
Well, can you tell me something, Cynthia, maybe you may not know at this point, absentee ballot voting or voting at the polls when it's been a poll site might have temporarily broke down. Black people and black and brown people tend to be fearful of absentee ballot voting. Even as I go around here this year, even with COVID, we're fearful that that's a way of keeping us from voting. Can you tell me how that is addressed? And I understand that during the early voting, as well as on election day, you're going to have a sealed ballot box available. Is that correct?
That's correct. In fact, we have one here already at 200 Varick Street, our office. It's always best to be able to vote on the machine at either an early voting site or on election day. That vote goes through the system and is calculated on Tuesday night. But because of all of the various concerns with COVID, people being out of the city, people being nervous about even going into a public poll site, the other option is to do absentee voting. And you may be nervous about it, but I guarantee you that all of the ballots that we do receive are definitely counted. They're not counted on Tuesday night. They're counted over the course of a couple weeks. We have bipartisan teams that set up, and they, if the voter is a valid voter, we then open up that absentee ballot, and then that gets scanned in by our scanners, and it becomes part of the official ballot, of the official total results.
Now, Dr. Dodson, let me just give a little background on Dr. Dodson, a national leader in the movement to preserve African-American history, retired as the director of the New York Public Library Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in 2011. At the Schomburg, his visionary leadership over 25 years developed the center into the world's leading and most prestigious repository for materials and artifacts on the global Black experience. Under his direction, the center, which has grown into a 75,000 square foot complex, has produced unprecedented programs and exhibitions, enhanced the accessibility of its materials through digital initiatives, doubled its collections from 5 to more than 10 million items. Under his superb leadership,
that's enough.
in all areas of the center's operations leaves it strongly positioned for future service and continued growth. And I want to just thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Dodson. Of course, I've known you for years. We've been friends, and we became closer once I served in the city council. But I mean, I welcome you so much to today's program. And at some point, you and Leilani, who is very active in the labor movement, she is very active in social and human rights. She is very active with the NAACP Next Gens. I want that's next generation, in case you didn't know. But I want you to give a little history, because Leilani has some questions and some issues as it relates to why should we vote as young people? Not so much for herself, but for those of that's in her circle of friends and associates. So I thought it would be great, Dr. Dodson, if you could just give some history, some of why it's so important for us to vote, not just in the presidential elections, but in local elections as well.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I have been, I say, mulling over this question for a long time, and over the issue that's really facing us right now, which is a really nationally coordinated campaign to reduce the number of people of African descent who participated in this election. This is something that didn't start last week or last year. It's been going on now for several years as they've gone through and redone constitutions and other kinds of things, especially in the southern region, to favor full white participation on the one hand, and to discourage the presence of Blacks in the election process as much as possible. This issue goes back at least 100, 150 years, if not longer. And it actually goes back to the beginning of the nation. At the core is the question of who are citizens of the United States. And one of the reasons for this voter suppression activity that's been going on is a certain white supremacist group that go back to the period of the Confederacy, frankly do not believe that Black people are qualified to be citizens. And so a lot of their actions to keep us from voting are them carrying out their belief that Black people should not be counted in this republic as full-fledged citizens. The Constitution itself did not acknowledge that initially. And we should be very mindful of that. And we also should be mindful of the fact that the preamble, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and promote the general welfare. The we the people in there, though stated as though it applied to everyone, did not as citizens. The majority of the people who were considered citizens at the time that the nation was founded were white men. There were some white women who were allowed to vote up to 1776, but prior to 1776 and after, the assumption, even among the most liberal thinkers, was that this was in fact, citizenship was a property of men. It was a property of white men. And though we claim to be a nation seeking to have full participation, the concept of citizenship was limited to what they used to call those who were rich, well-born, and able. The rich, the well-born, and the able. And so Black people were automatically ruled out of that, but so were a lot of white people. And all white women and all Black men were ruled out of that. And only a series of changes in the Constitution and amendments over the years have brought the Black population and women into participation in this. But each time it has brought them in, it has been contested. And it continues to be contested now. And so the reason why I feel that certainly African-American, but every person who claims citizenship in the United States has an obligation to practice that citizenship through the method of the voting process for various levels of leadership. Remember, we are a representative democracy, not a direct one. And so if we're not voting, then we're giving up our right, first of all, to be participants in it, and second, raising questions about our own status as citizens in the country. The last thing we need to do is take any action that raises questions about our citizenship status in America, because America has been constantly raising questions about our citizenship status from day one. And so our almost ritual behavior each year and each election cycle should be to cast that vote to reaffirm for ourselves, but also for America, that we are citizens and we are here and we intend to participate as fully as possible in this still yet to be fully developed American democracy. That's where we are, and that's what we're facing right now. And what is, I guess, been a great source of concern for me over the last 6 to 9 months is how much, thanks to the promotion of our current president, these white supremacist notions have reemerged as part of the political thinking of far too many people, white folk who are part of this American nation, who believe that they have to deny our citizenship in order for them to affirm theirs. So we're in that kind of situation right now. And this particular election is of significance for, again, 2 reasons. One, we cannot allow that assumption that we have no right to vote and to be recognized as false. We cannot allow that assumption to even be in the air. And second, we have the obligation as citizens to practice our citizenship. And practicing our citizenship, I should say, is not just casting a vote. It's casting a vote and holding those elected accountable and holding ourselves accountable to pursue the goals and objectives that we put on the political table each time we go into an election cycle. So I'll stop there and we'll be glad to respond to any questions.
You know, on that note, it's so very important, and I'm glad you brought all of this history up, because I'm going to ask Leilani to please address and just speak for a moment on why young people today, not you, because you're very active, Leilani, but what does your generation feel? Why do they feel that their vote doesn't count, that there's no need to vote? Or do you see that they're increasing and changing from that, particularly since, and I just want to remind people that here in New York, you used to have to take a test, a written test that you had to pass before you were allowed to register to vote. And that was a way to suppress the Black vote. Leilani, please.
Well, thank you all, and thank you for having me, and always making a space for young people to express. That's important, and that type of engagement we need to see more of across this country and the city from leadership. So thank you. I would say, from my lens as a millennial, I see it twofold. I see that a lot of young people are becoming a lot more activated and engaged. And then I see the other side where there are a lot of young people who are just simply disgruntled, frustrated with the way in which this country has been operating. They don't feel as though they see themselves in America. You know, with all that's going on with police brutality across this country, a lot of them have frustrations with systems, you know. So just from that interaction and experience that many young people have on a day-to-day basis, whether it be encounters with police or just maybe interactions that are not the most positive in the educational system. There's a lot of not so positive things that are not being reinforced for young people. And honestly, young people, I don't think that they're connecting social issues that they care most about to politics. I don't think that voter education is there. And if we can shift and explain to young people the ways in which the issues that plague them or concern them the most have a direct link, a connection to policies and laws that are implemented by way of lawmakers, I think that you'll see more and more engagement. But I think with this youth, with this generation, you know, This is, someone joked around, I think it was Hazel Dukes, I can't recall, but it was called, we're a microwave generation, which is somewhat true. Like, folks want to see progress instantly. We want things instantly. Even the way communication comes at us, social media, everything is very quick, the way we absorb information. And we don't do enough fact finding. We don't do enough research to identify what is being told to us or what's being amplified by the media as accurate information. And so when you have all of that happening in concert for a young person, it's overwhelming to really understand your position and what role you play in society. And to just really kind of focus on that population of young people who are frustrated. I share that frustration as a young person as well. It's very discouraging to be a part of processes, do everything right, go to school, be gainfully employed, and then still not really be able to afford to live in my own community where I'm being priced out. It's frustrating to know, that, no matter what you do, that's the right thing to do in this country. It seems as though we're in an uphill battle, as Dr. Howard spoke so well about our history. In this country, we're fighting not just against the system, but a culture. And so I think young people are struggling to identify what role they can play to make that shift. When we look back in our history books and we're told by our family members, all the struggles and fights that we've been through, when we still see this condition. And the young people can't really process, why do we still see this condition? Why hasn't my environment changed much, even if we participate in voting? And my response is, we're not participating on every level of government. It's not enough to just vote for your president, but you have to, all politics is local. You have to vote on a local level, state level, federal level. And I think if we can really not just pressure everyone in the community, just vote, we have to really put a lot of emphasis on the why for this generation. And I think that communication piece is somewhat missing. We have to reinforce the why it's important, and in what way on a federal level, these decisions that we care about, whether it be criminal justice reform, whether it be educational reform, what level of government on a federal level, how does that impact me on a local level? And so that's what we spend our time trying to do. Next Gen with NAACP, the way we try to engage youth is always through non-traditional civic engagement activities. We try to meet them where they are and try to explain these things to make that connection. I think a lot of young people, if it's about, the federal government that they're concerned about, criminal justice reform that they're concerned about, I think we need to look at the fact that it's federal policies that's created, the housing authority system. It's the federal policies that's created redlining. It's the federal policies that's created racial disparities in this country. And so, I think it's also outrageous that out of 100 senators, there's only 3 that are Black. And so if we're not at the table and if our voices are not represented on a federal level, then we can't really complain if we're not doing our due diligence and making sure we're electing the right people that represent us, that reflect our values on every single level of government, and not just turn our backs and turn our heads. Once we vote, we have to, as Dr. Howard mentioned and Ms. Cynthia, we have to remain persistent in the process, ensuring that our lawmakers are doing right by us, even when we're not looking.
That's a lot you said, Leilani. But I'd like, Dr. Dodson, for you to address, knowing that you know the history, knowing that you just, reiterated just a little bit of the history of the fact that we died, and that apparently is not enough to the microwave generation to vote. Can you just quickly address just a little bit of what she said, Dr. Dodson, and then Cynthia?
Believe it or not, there was a time when I was less than 30 years old. And as fate would have it, it actually fell during the period of the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
And the motivation for most of the young people who were in the civil rights movement was not to run away from struggle or throw up their hands and say they can't do anything. It was to go to work and organize the counter struggle. And so the movement that we had, and if you've read it, I'm certain, some of the older folk, those from the NAACP or Urban League, et cetera, were going through a court strategy, which was working. But it wasn't moving fast enough for the young people. And so the young people organized what eventually became the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Commission, and just went head to head with those obstacles that were blocking people's full participation in society. And through demonstrations and local community organizing and a little of everything else, we're able to buttress a movement, a mass movement that ultimately transformed America. We cannot let ourselves, as young people, as middle-aged people, as old people, as frustrating as the society is trying to make it for us, we cannot succumb to that sense of frustration. Our challenge is to, yes, be upset about it, be concerned about it, but also be proactive in finding our particular place. We, as citizens, have that as much as a right as we do the right to vote. And we have that obligation as citizens of a democracy to take ownership of the processes by which, or at least be involved in the process of determining what the national priorities and how they affect those that we care the most about. That's an obligation that we have. Getting frustrated and basically walking away from stuff will change nothing.
Right.
I can guarantee you that.
I thank you so much, Dr. Dodson, for that, because that's true. Cynthia, Doty, just quickly, can you just finalize this?
I would just say that, first of all, the young people have been leading in movements from the 60s and the 50s. So we're hoping the young people will stay with us this time. And 4 years ago, the results, I think, of the election were partly because people did not show up to vote at all. And people sat home, and they thought it didn't matter. So that should be a lesson for all of us to really come out this time and vote.
Well, I want to thank, I know that our time is up. I want to thank Cynthia, Doty, of course, Leilani, Irvin for being with us. And I want to thank, of course, my longtime friend, Dr. Howard Dodson, for being with us. And thank you to New Yorkers for coming on to see Represent NYC on MNN. This is Inez E. Dickens saying, don't forget, no matter what your age, as long as you're registered to vote, come out and vote.